Hi there. In today's study, we're going to be looking at Numbers chapter 17. If you have a Bible, I would encourage you to follow along. Actually, read through the chapter for yourself. We're looking at Numbers chapter 17. Now, from the last lesson we had in Numbers 16, we had Korah and 250 other men assemble and question the authority of Moses and Aaron. And that raises the question leading into today's story about who gives leaders their authority. Moses and Aaron had their authority questioned, and the Korah and those who were with him wanted to know who gave Moses the authority to rule over them, to lead them in through the desert. The quick answer is ultimately it is God who gives those who are in authority the right to govern. But let's look at Scripture to see what Scripture has to say about that. We're just going to take a little bit of a bunny rabbit trail to begin with. So we're going to start with Daniel. We're going to look at Daniel chapter 2, verse 21. We'll pick up our reading at the end of 20. Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and season. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." Daniel is telling the king that he's talking to, which in this case is Nebuchadnezzar, that God controls the seasons, God controls governments and who is involved in leading the people. God is the one who chooses to bless men and women with wisdom and knowledge. So ultimately, authority then is given by God to those who lead um, the people. Let's also look at our second passage, Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Romans chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resist what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. God allows and ultimately is sovereign over the election of our prime minister or the American president or the British prime minister. God raises up Queen Elizabeth, then ultimately, humanly speaking, he will raise up a King Charles. It is God who is sovereign over the affairs of this world, and God raises up leaders and brings down leaders at the appointed time. So let's go back to look at the book of Numbers, and we're going to look at Numbers chapter 17. And in this passage, we're continuing on with the story where Moses' authority and Aaron's authority is questioned. The 250 men who ultimately raised the concern of Moses and Aaron's authority and by what right they had to govern the people, God clearly said that those 250 men weren't the ones who were going to take control. They had died as they were swallowed up and taken into a hole in the ground. So God instructs Moses to gather together 12 staffs and to label each one with their names, one representing each leader from the various 12 tribes. And then Moses was to take Aaron's staff and he was to bring it as well to represent the tribe of Levi. Aaron and Moses were both from the tribe of Levi. Now, I have a staff. It's got a rubber end to it, and a nice grip to it. It's a basic piece of wood. In the same way that a staff during Bible times would have been very similar to this, just something that as you're walking, you can just lean on it. And it's another third leg, perhaps, to guide to help the person. It also can be used when working with sheep. Um, the men of Israel at this time were very much an agrarian culture, and they would have had lots of sheep, and the staff would have been used to guide those sheep. This tree or this limb, this branch has been dead for years. We've had it in our possession for at least 10 years. So it's been dead for years. Now, that is important to understand when we're getting into this story. So these staffs were gathered together, all 12 of them, and God instructed for them to be placed inside the tabernacle. And God said that the man that he chose to guide and lead the people, that one would bud. So I gave you that whole context of a staff and saying it's dead, and only living things will bud. So Aaron brings his together with all the other 11, and they were taken into the tabernacle. They waited one night, and then they went back to check on those staffs and see what was to become of them. When they pulled out Aaron's staff, it was unique because it obviously had a bud on it, but God went that much farther and beyond. He also had it blossom with ripe almonds. Almonds are a nut, and or it so overnight it not only blossomed, it also produced great fruit. And people were overwhelmed with grief when they recognized their sin. Jesus said in the New Testament, "By your fruit you shall know them." This is a different kind of fruit that Jesus was talking about, but obviously Aaron was known by the fruit that was found on his staff. Life is a case of a choice of obedience. All God asked of his people were for them to place their faith in him and to obey the laws that he gave to them. That same rod was the one that became a serpent. That same rod was the rod that was used throughout each of the plagues. A rod was more than just a symbol or a leadership thing that was used for shepherding. It's a picture of authority as well. I want to jump to Psalm 89. We're jumping everywhere today. Psalm chapter 89, and we're going to pick up our reading at verse 28. We're going to read five verses, starting at verse 28. My steadfast love I will keep for him forever. This is God speaking. And my covenant will stand firm for him. I will establish his offspring forever, and his throne as the days of the heavens. If his children forsake my law and do not walk according to my rules, if they violate my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. But I will not remove from him my steadfast love. A rod, a staff, both are a symbol of authority, and God uses that symbol of authority as instruction or guidance for his people. David talked about thy rod and thy staff, or your rod and your staff, in Psalm 23. And those things were used to guide the sheep, and they would guide people as well. Jesus was given divine authority, and is given by Isaiah the name of a rod or a staff. God's choice for Aaron did not mean that Aaron was in any way more spiritual or more godly or more of a perfect man. It's simply stating the fact that God had chosen Aaron to lead his people. So, what's the application for us today? God has raised up leaders over us, and these people are the ones that we are to submit to. They are to lead us, and God, in this process of calling and recognizing the call of Aaron, tells his people that they must follow through with the leading of those in authority over them. And same with us. We have people who are responsible for our lives and our welfare in government, in all structures of authority within our country. And may we be wise in our submission to them. That's it for today. I trust you have a great day.